The morning light crept into the small apartment the way it always did, thin, pale, and uninvited, slipping past the cheap curtains as if determined to expose every corner Daniel wished could remain dim a little longer. He breathed out slowly, the exhale heavy, the kind that came from deep in his chest. Being a single father meant mornings never started when the sun rose. They started when responsibility whispered that it was time. Before he moved, Daniel shifted his head just enough to see the tiny sleeping form next to him. Emma, she lay curled toward him, her pastel pink sleeve twisted around her wrist, her hair pressed in all directions like she'd fought a dream and won. Her little brown eyes, still closed, fluttered as she shifted, her hand tucked beneath her cheek in the same unmistakable way her mother used to sleep. That simple detail was enough to soften the bricks sitting on his chest. Sarah always had that same posture in the mornings, hand under her cheek, a little smile forming even before she opened her eyes. The memory flickered like a warm light, Sarah holding newborn Emma, her expression serene and full of love. A presence that felt more like a warm echo than a vivid memory. Daniel's breath caught. Even years later, the image struck him unexpectedly, like sunlight on glass. He brushed a strand of hair off Emma's forehead. "Time to wake up, Star," he whispered, his voice sticky with sleep and affection. Emma made a tiny sound, somewhere between a groan and a squeak. "5 more minutes." "Nope," Daniel said softly. "Science waits for no one." Her eyes cracked open, big brown circles full of curiosity. "But stars don't go to school," she argued weakly. "You're a special star?" he answered, tapping her nose. She scrunched her face. "That's not even science, Dad." Daniel smiled, a tired but real curve at the corner of his mouth. "I'll work on the accuracy." He swung his legs over the side of the bed, rubbing his face. In the mirror's dim reflection, he saw what he always did. The shadow of stubble he never seemed to fully shave, lines under his eyes carved by years of too little sleep, and a kind of worn-in warmth he clung to for Emma's sake. He got dressed while Emma hopped off the bed and immediately tripped over her own sneakers. "I'm okay," she announced. "I didn't even ask," he teased. In the kitchen, he packed her lunch the same way he had for years, peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, and his trademark the doodle on a sticky note. Today it was a puppy, a very lopsided, somewhat tragic-looking puppy. Emma peeked over his arm. "It looks like it's melting." "Thank you," he said proudly. "That wasn't never mind," she grinned. Their little apartment was alive now, filled with the rustling of backpacks, cereal bowls, clinking, and Emma's off-key humming. She wore her favorite lavender sweater with a tiny ribbon tying part of her hair. Her sneakers, decorated with star stickers, lit up with every step. As they walked out the door, he slung her backpack over one shoulder, his posture strong but burdened, the invisible weight of the world balanced awkwardly between responsibility and love. They drove toward school, and the neighborhood slowly woke around them. Other parents shuffled their kids along sidewalks, tired, yawning adults clutching coffee cups like life rafts, backpacks bouncing everywhere. "Dad," Emma asked as she watched the clouds through the window, "what are clouds made of?" "Marshmallows," he said without hesitation. She gasped. "You're lying." He sighed dramatically. "Fine, they're made of tiny water droplets." "That's boring." "Then it's marshmallows again." She laughed. A small, bright sound that didn't match the dark circles under Daniel's eyes, but somehow untangled something inside him. When they reached the school drop-off area, Emma hopped out with her pastel backpack bouncing. A group of kids from her class ran toward the entrance, calling her name. She waved back, shy but happy. Nearby, Miss Rivera stood by the door, greeting students. Calm, warm, glasses perched on her nose. She looked like someone built to understand children. She smiled at Emma. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said. "Ready for another big day?" Emma nodded, clutching Daniel's hand. Daniel appreciated Ms. Rivera more than he ever said aloud. She had a gift for making Emma feel seen without overwhelming her gentle nature. After Emma gave him a hug, one that lingered long enough for Daniel to feel her heartbeat, she ran toward her classmates. He watched her until she disappeared inside. He always did. As Daniel turned to leave, he caught sight of Mr. Halloway across the parking lot, climbing out of his ancient car. The man wore the same maintenance polo shirt every day, his thinning hair sticking to his forehead, his expression one of perpetual irritation. Even from here, Daniel could imagine him crossing his arms and tapping his foot impatiently. The man had a habit of treating every delay as a personal inconvenience. Daniel swallowed a groan. Another day working under him. Another day pretending the weight on his shoulders wasn't too much. He climbed back into the car, the echo of Emma's morning warmth fading into the familiar heaviness of reality. The grief he hid so well, the lingering memory of Sarah standing in sunlight, holding baby Emma with joy in her tired eyes, pressed gently against his ribs. Some mornings, it felt like a bruise he kept bumping. Other mornings, like today, it felt like a quiet reminder of everything he now carried alone. Before he drove off, he rested his forehead on the steering wheel and whispered into the silence of the car, "I am trying. I hope it's enough." And somewhere far away in memory and spirit, in the softest corner of his heart, he imagined Sarah smiling back at him, peaceful as always. The day had barely begun, and already Daniel felt both broken and whole, exhausted and hopeful, burdened and blessed. But he turned the key anyway. For Emma, always for Emma, thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Your support means the world. The drive from Emma's school to the community center always felt longer than it really was. Maybe it was the silence. Or maybe it was the shift from father to worker, from warmth to strain. It could have been just that once Emma disappeared through those school doors, the weight Daniel carried had no one to hide behind anymore. The community center parking lot had this faint buzz of early morning activity. Seniors in bright exercise outfits were shuffling toward the entrance, clutching their water bottles and sharing the latest gossip. A little cluster of teenagers, all hoodies and headphones in slouched posture, stood by the basketball courts, just waiting for the doors to unlock. And then there were the parents, hurrying past, tugging toddlers along, moving with the same tired rhythm as the school drop-off from earlier. Just normal people with normal lives and normal problems. Daniel parked in the far corner, the spot where his car's rattling wouldn't disturb anyone. He stepped out, adjusted his worn jacket, and ran a hand through his hair. He planned to hide the fatigue in his shoulders. Maybe stretch until he looked human again, but then he saw Mr. Halloway, marching across the lot like a storm cloud on legs. Of course, Halloway's voice boomed before he was even close. "Mercer, you're late." Daniel checked his watch. "It's 7:59. Exactly," Halloway snapped, though it made absolutely no sense. "We open at 8. Daniel had to bite back a sigh. "I'm here, aren't I?" Halloway just grunted, crossing his thick arms over his maintenance polo. His thinning hair fluttered in the morning breeze, which only made him look more irritated than usual. He rattled off the day's disasters. "We've got a leak in the east restroom, a smoke detector beeping nonstop in the kids' rec room, and someone jammed gum into the vending machine coin slot again." "Gum?" Daniel repeated seriously. "This is a community center," Halloway said flatly, as if that explained everything wrong with the world. Before Daniel could respond, a group of older women shuffled past, waving brightly at him. "Morning, sweetheart," one of them called out. "Morning, Mrs. Carter," Daniel replied, a smile breaking through despite himself. "Don't let him work you too hard," she added, nodding toward Halloway. "I heard that," Halloway muttered under his breath. They entered the building together. The center always had this familiar smell, a faint mix of chlorine from the indoor pool and popcorn from the concession stand. But today, the air also carried a sharp chemical scent of too much cleaning fluid, probably from an overenthusiastic volunteer. The moment Daniel reached the maintenance office, he grabbed his tool belt. He'd barely strapped it on when a tiny voice called from the doorway. "Hi, Mr. Mercer." He turned. It was the girl from the ice cream shop. Well, not at this moment. In the mornings, she volunteered at the community center front desk, finishing her shift before heading to the shop later in the afternoon. Today she was wearing a cheerful yellow volunteer vest instead of her usual bright apron, but her smile was the same, easy, genuine, and young. "Morning," Daniel said. "Busy already?" She laughed. "Oh, yeah." One kid brought 3 frogs inside, in his backpack. His mom screamed so loud I thought the fire alarm went off. Daniel chuckled. And here I thought gum in the vending machine was bad. You'll survive, she said teasingly, then waved and hurried down the hall. Her energy added a little spark to the dullness of the building, one of those tiny, daily kindnesses Daniel clung to more than he'd ever admit. He went straight to the east restroom first. The leak wasn't horrible, but it was messy enough to soak half the floor. While he was kneeling to tighten the pipe beneath the sink, he heard two teenagers whispering loudly near the door. "Is that Emma's dad?" "Yeah, he fixes everything here. He looks tired." "Dude, all grown-ups look tired." Daniel kept working, pretending he hadn't heard. He didn't mind being noticed, but he hated being pitied. The pipe finally tightened and he stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. His palms were rough from years of labor, his knuckles permanently marked with tiny scars. These were hands that had built a crib, cooked rush dinners, and folded little pastel sweaters. Hands that held his daughter through fevers, nightmares, and first days of school. Hands that had held Sarah for the last time. The memory came uninvited. Sarah in soft morning light, rocking baby Emma, humming lullabies with tired joy in her eyes. It was the kind of memory that felt blurred, as if his mind was protecting itself from too much detail. Daniel pushed the thought away gently, not angrily. Some memories hurt, but they were all he had left. Next up was the rec room. The smoke detector was chirping with the relentless persistence of something decidedly evil. A group of kids sat on colorful beanbags, one clutching a basketball, another tapping away on a tablet. A parent leaned against the wall, scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. Daniel grabbed a ladder and climbed. The detector beeped right in his ear, and he flinched. One little boy covered his ears dramatically. "Make it stoop," he whined. "I'm trying," Daniel grumbled playfully. When he finally removed the old battery, the boy cheered as if Daniel had just slain a dragon. Small victories counted for a lot. As he carried the ladder back toward storage, he passed the front desk and stopped. Miss Rivera was there. She must have been dropping off brochures for some kind of school partnership program. She smiled warmly when she saw him. "Daniel," she greeted. "How's your morning going?" "Leaky sinks, dying batteries, the usual," he replied. She laughed softly. "Sounds like you have your hands full." He shifted his tool belt. "Story of my life." She studied him with that subtle perceptiveness she was known for. "Emma looked a little quiet at drop-off," she said gently. "Not worried, just thoughtful." "She's a very emotionally intuitive child," Daniel nodded. "Yeah, she is. If she ever needs to talk, or if you do, you know my door is open." "Thank you," he said, and he really meant it. After she left, Daniel stepped back into the maintenance office and finally let out the heavy exhale he'd been holding since morning. He checked his phone, 3 new emails, 2 new maintenance tickets, 1 text from a coworker asking to switch shifts, and then a message from a number he recognized immediately. The school. His heart rate spiked. He unlocked the message. "Hi, Mr. Mercer. Emma had a difficult emotional moment this morning. She's okay, but we'd like you to come in to speak with us when you can." The world tilted slightly. Not much, just enough to make his stomach drop. Emma, his little star. His bright, ribbon-haired girl with stickers all over her backpack. Why was she upset? Was she hurt? Was she sick? Scared? He didn't even realize he'd grabbed his jacket until he was already halfway to the door. "Mercer!" Holloway barked. "Where do you think you're going?" "We have work. My daughter needs me," Daniel cut in, his voice firm in a way he rarely used. Holloway paused, his mouth half open. For a heartbeat, Daniel expected the usual lecture about responsibility and finishing the job. But then the older man's shoulders dropped, just ever so slightly. "Go," Holloway muttered. "Family first?" It was the closest thing to kindness he'd ever shown. Daniel nodded, already moving. He pushed through the center doors, past the teens, the seniors, the parents, the volunteers, everyone living their ordinary lives. He didn't know what waited for him at the school. He only knew one thing: nothing mattered more than Emma, never had, and never would. With his keys shaking slightly in his hand, he hurried to his car and drove. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe for more. Daniel drove faster than he meant to, though never enough to be reckless. The worry was doing the speeding for him, squeezing his chest tighter than any seat belt. His thoughts spun in quick, frantic circles, images of Emma crying, scared, hurt. A parent's worst imagination is a cruel thing, jumping straight to the worst possibilities because loving someone that deeply leaves no room for calm. Traffic felt impossible. Every red light stretched too long, every slow car in front of him felt intentional. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, his rough hands trembling slightly. His reflection in the mirror showed tired eyes that suddenly looked years older. "Please be okay, Star," he whispered into the empty car. When he finally turned into the school parking lot, he saw the familiar morning wave already thinning. Parents hurrying to work, teachers ushering kids inside. A few late arrivals rushed across the sidewalk, backpacks bouncing chaotically. Robert, one of the other dads who always looked like he was fighting a losing battle with time, nodded at Daniel in passing. "Rough morning?" he asked. Daniel could barely answer. "Something like that." He moved quickly, weaving past kids in colorful jackets and parents clutching travel mugs. The automatic doors opened, washing him in the warm hallway scent of crayons, floor cleaner, and the faint sweetness of cafeteria pastries. Miss Rivera waited near the office when she saw him. She must have been called in as well. She held a stack of folders, her neutral cardigan slightly askew as if she'd rushed from another meeting. Her expression was soft concern mixed with that steady calm she carried everywhere. "Daniel," she said gently, approaching him. "Thank you for coming so quickly." He nodded, though his voice felt stuck. "Is she okay?" "She's physically fine," Ms. Rivera reassured immediately. "She just had an emotional moment." He breathed out, relief flooding him so forcefully his knees weakened. What happened?" "It's better if we sit down," she said. "Come with me." She guided him to her office, passing a small group of second graders coloring posters outside their classroom. A few waved at Daniel. Children recognized adults who appeared in hallways often enough. Emma's classmates, lively, loud, full of energy, barely noticed the tension swirling around him as they argued about whether the poster needed more glitter. Inside Ms. Rivera's office, the lighting was soft, warm. Fidget toys sat in a small basket beside her desk. A tiny plant drooped deliberately, as if even it understood the emotional weight of the room. "Please," she said, motioning for him to sit. He lowered himself into the chair, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "Tell me," Ms. Rivera sat across from him. Emma became upset during morning warm-ups. She tried to participate, but her eyes kept drifting toward the door. When her teacher asked what was wrong, she started crying. Daniel's stomach tightened. Was someone mean to her? "No," Ms. Rivera said softly, shaking her head. "She said she was worried. About you." The words struck him with more force than he expected, like being hit in the chest with something soft but heavy. "Worried about me?" His voice cracked. "Why?" Ms. Rivera folded her hands, her expression full of understanding. She said, "Sometimes Daddy looks sad, and I don't want him to be sad anymore." Daniel swallowed hard. His throat felt like sandpaper. For a moment, he couldn't speak at all. He pressed a hand to his forehead. "I didn't think she noticed," he whispered. "Children notice more than we imagine," Ms. Rivera said gently. "Especially emotionally perceptive children, like Emma. She reads you carefully. She feels deeply, sometimes deeply enough to feel responsible." He lifted his head sharply. "Responsible?" No, she shouldn't feel that." "I know," she agreed softly. "But she does." "Today she said she thought maybe she wasn't enough to make you happy." Daniel shut his eyes. That sentence slammed into him with brutal precision. A flash of Sarah's face appeared uninvited, her soft smile, her peaceful gaze, the way she had looked holding newborn Emma, hope radiating from her like sunlight. He felt like he was failing them both. Failing the memory of the woman he loved. Failing their daughter, the brightest piece of her he had left. "When she said that," Miss Rivera continued, "she broke down crying. That's why we contacted you. Not because she's in trouble, but because she needs reassurance from you." He nodded, blinking back the burn in his eyes. Yeah. "I need to talk to her." "I'll bring her in," Ms. Rivera said quietly. She stepped out of the office, leaving the door open. Daniel sat alone, staring at his calloused hands. The hands that worked overtime, fixed broken vending machines, packed lunches, folded sweaters. But somehow, the one thing he wanted to fix more than anything, Emma's little heart, felt like the thing slipping through his grip. Through the doorway, he saw students passing by, kids from Emma's class laughing, parents signing forms at the front desk, a teacher carrying a tray of art supplies. Ordinary life carried on, background characters in a world where his whole world was a 7-year-old girl with sticker-covered sneakers. And then he saw her. Emma walked hesitantly beside Miss Rivera, eyes red, cheeks blotchy. Her little pastel sweater looked too big on her today. When she entered the office, she ran to Daniel instantly, climbing into his lap and curling into his chest like she might disappear if she let go. "Daddy!" she choked. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her hair. "I'm here," he whispered, voice shaking. "I'm right here." She clutched his shirt with both hands. "I thought you were sad because of me." "No," he said fiercely, pulling back to look at her face. "Never because of you, not once. You're the reason I get up every morning. But sometimes—" her lip quivered. "Sometimes you look like it hurts." His breath shuddered. "Sometimes I miss your mom," he admitted softly. "Sometimes I get tired. But none of that is your fault." She leaned her forehead against his. "I just want you to be happy." He cupped her cheeks gently. "You make me happy." "More than you know." Miss Rivera watched quietly, respectfully giving them space. For a long moment, father and daughter held each other, the office silent except for the soft, uneven breaths of a little girl who had feared too much and the father who had hidden too much. When Emma finally calmed, Miss Rivera spoke softly. "Emma, sweetheart, your feelings are important. But your dad's feelings aren't your job to fix. It's okay to love him without carrying his troubles." Emma nodded slowly. Daniel kissed her forehead. "And I'll do better. I promise." They stayed like that another minute before Ms. Rivera offered Emma a small fidget toy, a pastel blue star. Emma took it shyly, squeezing it in her hands. "Would you like to head back to class when you're ready?" Ms. Rivera asked. Emma looked at Daniel. "Will you be okay?" He smiled, real and warm. "Now I will." She hugged him again, smaller this time, steadier, then slipped off his lap to follow Ms. Rivera back to class. As she walked away, her sneakers blinking faintly, Daniel whispered, "I love you, Star." He watched until she disappeared around the corner. Then he sat alone again, heavier and lighter, all at once, a man broken open in the quiet, finding strength in the smallest arms. When he finally stood to leave, he passed parents filling out papers, kids chatting loudly, teachers hurrying normal life again. The world didn't stop for him. But maybe it didn't have to? He had something stronger than the weight. He had a daughter who loved him enough to worry. And he had the chance to love her better. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more. The night dragged itself into morning like a reluctant confession. Daniel Mercer didn't he remember falling asleep, only the feeling of his body giving out somewhere between packing Emma's backpack and collapsing on the living room floor, tools still scattered from the handyman calls he took after his shift. When the alarm burst through the quiet, it felt like a physical shove to the chest. He blinked at the ceiling, disoriented. His mind reached first not for consciousness but for obligations. Lunch to pack. Papers to sign, clothes to wash, rent due next week. The sink leaking again. Exhaustion pressed down on him like extra gravity, unfair, unasked for, all-consuming. Then a small sound cut through the fog. "Daddy?" Emma's sleepy voice, gentle as soft wind. She was standing at the edge of the couch, hair messy, her pastel sweater pulled on backward, backpack drooping from one shoulder. Her brown eyes held that familiar mix of curiosity and quiet concern, too mature for a 7-year-old, too aware of everything adults pretend to hide. Daniel forced himself upright, ignoring the stab of pain in his back. "Hey, little star," his voice cracked, but he pulled a smile anyway. "Big day, school, pancakes, chaos?" He ruffled her hair half-heartedly. She smiled, tiny and sincere. "You slept on the couch again." "Temporary adult experiment," he said, trying to make it light. "Scientists will write papers about it someday," Emma giggled, but the worry didn't leave her eyes. She never said it, but she knew when he wasn't okay. She always did. They moved through their morning routine like a half-remembered dance. Daniel burned the pancakes, but cut them into little stars anyway, and Emma pretended they tasted better that way. He doodled a cartoon cloud waving inside her lunchbox, a sleepy joke they'd made up months ago. "Cloudy McCloudface wishes you a brave day," Emma beamed. "He's very wise." The warmth in her voice eased something inside him. But beneath it, the weight remained grief, exhaustion, the constant invisible scramble to hold a life together without breaking. And today felt especially breakable. By the time they reached the school, the chaos had already begun. Other parents clustered near the entrance, coffee cups in hand, hair messy, kids tugging them forward like small tornadoes. Backpacks bounced. Morning chatter filled the air. Emma stayed close to Daniel, quieter than the rest. Her hand slipped into his automatically, a soft, instinctive search for reassurance. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, but she didn't let go. Miss Rivera, the school counselor, stood near the doorway greeting families. She wore a calm smile and a neutral cardigan, the kind of presence that soothed without trying. When she spotted Daniel and Emma, her expression softened. "Good morning, you two." Emma gave a tiny wave. Daniel tried for a normal greeting, but his voice came out thin. "Morning, Miss Rivera." Her perceptive eyes flicked over him unshaven, exhausted, wearing the same jacket as yesterday. She didn't comment, simply tilted her head gently. "Daniel, are you managing okay?" He laughed once, sharp and short. "Define managing?" Ms. Rivera's voice softened. "We can talk later if you want. We're fine," he said a little too quickly. Emma squeezed his hand. Miss Rivera noticed, but didn't push. "Emma, sweetheart, you ready for class?" Emma nodded, though slowly. Daniel knelt and gave her a hug that lasted a beat too long. "I'll see you after school, promise," Emma whispered. "Don't forget." "I never do," but inside something twisted painfully, because forgetting wasn't the problem, falling apart was. Work hit him like a storm. The maintenance hallway smelled like bleach and old metal, and Daniel's hands stung from scrubbing tools before he even clocked in. Mr. Halloway was waiting, arms crossed, face already pinched in irritation as if the day personally offended him. "Mercer, you're late." 2 minutes, Daniel said, heading toward the supply room. 2 minutes is 2 minutes. "And you didn't finish the inventory list yesterday." "That's because I was fixing the water heater leak you said was urgent," Halloway huffed. "Excuses. People manage more than one task at a time." Daniel tightened his jaw. The man didn't know or didn't care that Daniel worked nights too, that he raised a daughter alone, that he hadn't had 8 hours of sleep in months, but he swallowed it. He always swallowed it. "Anything else?" he asked flatly. "Yeah, you can start by unclogging the staff restroom." Someone made a mess. Of course they had. Daniel headed down the hall, shoulders heavy. As he worked, exhaustion blurred his vision. The plunger slipped. Dirty water splashed his shoes. He inhaled, trying not to break, not to scream, not to... A memory hit him without permission. Sarah, his wife, laughing as she held baby Emma in their old sunlit kitchen, her hair glowing, her smile soft. "You're doing great," she told him once. "You'll always be a good dad." He blinked hard and came back to a fluorescent-lit bathroom. Alone, elbows deep in someone else's mess, he wasn't sure he believed her anymore. By late afternoon, Daniel's body felt like a frayed cord. When Halloway barked his name again, Daniel turned too quickly, foot sliding on wet tile. His hand slammed into a metal shelf. A sharp bolt of pain tore up his wrist. He hissed, clutching it. Halloway frowned impatiently. "What now?" "I hurt my hand," Daniel said through gritted teeth. Just give me a minute." "You don't get a minute, Mercer. We've got a schedule." Something inside Daniel cracked. Weeks, months, years of tension snapped in a single moment. He straightened, eyes bloodshot, breathing hard. "I'm doing the work of 3 people. I'm not a machine, Halloway," the older man scoffed. "You're not doing me any favors. Plenty of people need jobs." Daniel's chest tightened. "I have a daughter, and that's not my problem," Halloway cut in. Daniel froze. The cruelty of it hit him like a punch to the gut. For a moment he couldn't speak. His vision blurred, not with tears, but with rage and despair mixing into something volatile. And then he turned and walked out. He didn't grab his tools. Didn't finish the shift. Didn't look back at Halloway shouting behind him. His brain screamed, "I can't do this anymore." His heart whispered, "But you have to." He didn't know where he was walking until he arrived at the little ice cream shop, the one he and Emma visited on good days and bad ones. A bell jingled softly. The worker, a cheerful young adult with a bright apron and warm eyes, smiled. "Rough day?" they asked gently. Daniel let out a shaky breath. "Something like that. Want your usual? Chocolate swirl for your little girl?" He nodded. "And maybe something for me too." "No problem. You look like you need it." When the worker handed him the cone, their smile was small and understanding. Unexpected kindness made Daniel's throat tighten. He sat at a corner table, hands trembling. The ice cream melted slowly, dripping onto his fingers. He didn't even taste it. He felt the tears before he felt their fall, soft, quiet, painful. He bowed his head, shoulders shaking, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a man finally reaching the breaking point he'd been skirting for far too long. All he could think was, "I'm failing. I'm failing Emma. I'm failing everything." But somewhere under the despair, a faint memory of Sarah flickered her soft eyes, her voice like sunlight. "You're doing your best, Daniel. That's all love asks." He closed his eyes and let himself cry. Just for a moment, just enough to breathe again. Remember, if you're struggling, you're not alone. It's okay to not be okay, and reaching out is a sign of strength. The next morning came too fast and too loud. I woke with swollen eyes, the faint sticky trace of dried tears tight on my cheeks. The remnants of last night's breakdown at the ice cream shop lingered like bruises on my spirit. I hadn't meant to fall asleep sitting up at my kitchen table, but exhaustion had dragged me under. Bills sat scattered around me, unopened mail fanned out like accusing reminders. My wrist still ached from yesterday's slip at work. And worst of all my job, I had walked out, no call, no explanation. The reality of it settled heavily in my gut. But despite it all, the soft sound of tiny footsteps approaching reminded me that I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Emma appeared at the doorway, her pastel sweater hanging crookedly, hair sticking up on one side. Her brown eyes were full of quiet worry. "You slept here," she whispered. "Seems I keep choosing strange places to sleep," I said, forcing a small smile. Emma shuffled closer and leaned gently into me. "Are you sad again?" I hesitated. Lying to her felt like lying to sunlight. A little. She slid her tiny hand into mine. "Okay, I can be extra brave today." Emotion hit me hard, unexpected, sharp and tender. I pulled her into my lap and held her tight, breathing in the familiar smell of shampoo and childhood. "I'm the one who needs to be brave," I murmured. Emma shook her head. "We can take turns." The simplicity of her comfort nearly brought me to tears again. The weight on my shoulders felt a little less crushing, if only for a moment. Her strength, so small and so pure, was a lifeline. The school parking lot bustled with the usual morning chaos. Other parents clutched coffee cups, tugging their kids toward the entrance while backpacks bounced against small bodies. Kids shouted greetings to each other, full of life and uncomplicated energy. Emma stuck close to me, her hand wrapped in mine. I walked slower today, as though every step required careful thought. Ms. Rivera was outside again, greeting families with her warm, steady presence. The moment she saw me, her expression shifted from friendly to concerned. "Daniel," she said softly, "you look tired." "Tired is my natural state," I joked weakly. Ms. Rivera's eyes flicked between me and Emma. "Why don't you drop by my office after you take her in?" I opened my mouth to deflect, to make an excuse, but Emma tugged gently on my sleeve. "Daddy, maybe you should go?" I looked at her, surprised. "You think so?" She nodded earnestly. "Miss Rivera helps people." "That's her job?" I smiled at the seriousness in her tone, kissed her forehead, and watched her walk into the school building, still small, still brave, backpack covered with joyful stickers she'd chosen herself. When she disappeared inside, I exhaled slowly. The weight returned, but I kept my promise. I turned toward Ms. Rivera. Her office was exactly what one would expect from a school counselor, soft colors. Bookshelves filled with titles about feelings and empathy, 2 chairs angled for conversation, and a small table with fidget toys. "Sit wherever you want," she said gently. I lowered myself into a chair, staring at my hands. They looked more like tools than body parts, rough, worn, tired. Ms. Rivera sat across from me, her posture open and calm. "Tell me what's going on." No judgment. I tried to talk, the words just wouldn't come out. My throat closed. I stared at the carpet. Finally, quietly, I whispered, I walked out of my job yesterday. Her eyes softened. That must have been overwhelming. It wasn't planned, I said, rubbing my face. I just broke. I couldn't take it anymore. Holloway kept pushing, and I'm so tired, and Emma needs everything, and I can't lose this apartment. And my voice cracked. Ms. Rivera rested her hands in her lap, grounded, patient. Daniel, you've been carrying too much alone for too long. I gave a bitter laugh. I don't have anyone else to carry it. That's not true, she said gently. There are supports you haven't reached for yet. Have you considered asking for help? My mind rebelled instantly. I don't want Emma to think her dad can handle his own life. But she already sees you, Ms. Rivera said. And she loves you. Emma doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs you to be human. Her words settled over me like a warm blanket. I felt something loosen inside. She continued, You've been grieving, working multiple jobs, raising a child, and dealing with an unsupportive supervisor. Anyone would struggle. My eyes burned. I miss Sarah. Miss Rivera reached for a tissue box and set it within my reach. Of course you do. The memory of Sarah appeared in my mind-soft lighting. Blurred edges, her gentle hands holding newborn Emma, her voice echoed, warm and encouraging, You're doing your best. That's enough. I swallowed hard. Maybe, Ms. Rivera said, it's time to accept that doing everything alone isn't the only way to love your daughter. I looked at the floor, letting her words sink in. She wasn't telling me I was failing. She was telling me it was okay to be human. After our talk, I thanked Ms. Rivera and stepped outside. The sun was brighter than I expected. I felt not fixed, not healed, but less alone. A fraction lighter. I walked without a plan, ending up at the community center. Seniors walked laps in tracksuits. Teenagers played basketball loudly. Parents chased toddlers. Ordinary life, messy and comforting. I sat on a bench and let myself breathe. Really breathe for the first time in what felt like forever. Then, strangely, my feet took me somewhere else, the ice cream shop, the same one from last night. The bell jingled softly as I entered. The young man behind the counter looked up, surprised. Back again? Didn't think I'd see you this early, I shrugged. Didn't think I'd be here either. He leaned on the counter. Everything okay? No, I admitted. But maybe it will be, he smiled gently. That's a good place to start. He handed me a small cup of vanilla on the house. Vanilla for when the world's too complicated, I chuckled softly. Thanks. As I ate, I looked out the window at people walking by, parents with strollers, kids with ice cream, morning joggers. Life continued. Maybe I could continue too. Maybe it wasn't about being strong enough to carry the whole world. Maybe it was about being brave enough to set some of it down. Later that afternoon, I returned to the school for pickup. Emma burst out of the doors with her usual tiny steps, her backpack bouncing. Daddy! She ran into my arms and I lifted her, wrist aching but heart suddenly full. I talked to Ms. Rivera, I told her softly. Was she nice? Emma's little hands cupped my face. Do you feel better? I paused, then answered honestly. A little is good, she said wisely. But I wasn't breaking anymore. I was bending just enough to let a light through the cracks. And for now, that was everything. It was the kind of quiet golden glow that Sarah used to call a beginning kind of light. Daniel stood in the kitchen, pouring pancake mix into a bowl. Today the pancakes didn't burn. Today his hands didn't tremble. Today he breathed without feeling bruised. Emma padded into the kitchen, hair messy, pastel sweater crooked. Her backpack still on the floor where she dropped it last night. She rubbed her eyes, then smiled when she saw her dad. You're making stars again, she said softly. Only the best for you, Daniel answered, and it no longer felt like a line he forced himself to say. There was warmth behind the words this time. Emma climbed onto a chair and swung her legs. Did you sleep on a couch or a bed last night? He laughed, really laughed. A bed, a real bed. With a pillow and everything? Emma grinned proudly. See, you're already better. Daniel flipped a pancake and let the truth settle. He wasn't fixed. He wasn't perfect, but he wasn't drowning anymore either. School drop-off, a new kind of goodbye at the school, the usual chaos swirled other parents wrangling children, backpacks everywhere, kids sprinting toward their friends. But Daniel felt more present than he had in months. Emma held his hand as they walked toward the entrance. A little girl squealed nearby, running toward her mom with a glittery lunchbox. Boys chased each other, nearly tripping over stray backpacks. Parents laughed, sighed, rushed, complained. Life, messy and loud, moved around them. Miss Rivera stood near the entrance, her calm smile already waiting. She looked at Daniel with a mixture of surprise and relief. "You look lighter," she said. "That's one word for it," Daniel replied. "I'd also accept functioning adult in the loosest possible definition," Miss Rivera chuckled. "That's good to hear." Emma squeezed his hand and whispered, "See? You look good." Daniel knelt and hugged her, not too tight, but enough. Their goodbyes no longer felt desperate or afraid. They felt like small promises that the day would be okay. "Have a brave day, little star," Emma nodded. "You too, Daddy." When she disappeared into the classroom hallway, Daniel exhaled, not with sadness, but with something like hope. Facing Mr. Holloway, a choice made clear after school drop-off, Daniel drove not to the community center or the ice cream shop, but to his workplace. The maintenance building loomed ahead, dull gray and familiar. His stomach knotted. Slightly old habits of anxiety didn't disappear overnight. But today he walked inside anyway. A few employees glanced at him with mild surprise. Background chatter filled the hallway, someone complaining about a broken AC unit, another coworker talking about weekend plans. Then Mr. Holloway emerged from around the corner, arms crossed, scowl already forming. "Well, look who decided to show up," Holloway grunted. "You think you can abandon your shift and then walk back in like nothing happened?" Daniel inhaled slowly. He didn't flinch, not today. "I came to talk," Daniel said. Holloway scoffed. "About what? Your job?" "You're lucky I haven't fired you yet." Daniel shook his head. "No, I'm quitting," Holloway blinked. "You're what?" "I'm done," Daniel said, standing straighter. "I walked out yesterday because I hit my limit. But I'm leaving today because I deserve better than being treated like garbage," Holloway sputtered. "You can't just—" "I can," Daniel cut in, voice steady. "And I am." For the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't feel small under that man's stare. He felt free. He placed his work keys on the counter and turned to leave. "Good luck out there," Holloway muttered, voice dripping with sarcasm. Daniel didn't look back. "You too," he said calmly, and walked out the door. The community center, a kind of beginning by midday, Daniel found himself wandering into the community center again. The air smelled faintly of old gym mats and hope. Seniors walked laps, chatting about the weather. Teenagers bounced basketballs, laughter echoing across the gym. Parents herded toddlers toward a dance class, normal human life. Not easy, but shared. A small job posting board caught his eye near the entrance. A colorful flyer read, "Community Center Maintenance Assistant needed, flexible hours, friendly staff, family-friendly environment." Daniel felt something ease inside his chest. He took a picture of the flyer. Maybe he didn't have a job now, but he had possibilities. Ice cream and the first real breath by afternoon, Daniel wandered again, this time to the little ice cream shop. The bell jingled, and the ice cream shop worker looked up from behind the counter. "Twice in 1 week? Should I be worried or flattered?" Daniel smiled. "Still deciding." The worker leaned forward. "You seem—" "Better today?" Daniel considered the words. "Yeah, I think I am. No charge today," the worker said, sliding him a small cup of chocolate swirl, the flavor Emma loved most. "Call it emotional recovery ice cream," Daniel laughed quietly. "Thanks." He sat near the window, watching people pass by, kids holding cones, couples walking dogs, a dad balancing a toddler on his shoulders. When he finished his ice cream, he didn't feel guilty. Didn't feel broken. He felt steady. A memory flickered: Sarah holding newborn Emma, sunlight making her look almost like an angel. "You'll always be a good dad," she'd whispered once. Daniel touched the table thoughtfully. Maybe she was right. Pick up, the light returning when Emma came running out of school at the end of the day, her smile lit up everything around her. "Daddy!" she yelled, backpack bouncing. He knelt and caught her in a hug, spinning her around even though his wrist protested. Her giggles filled his ears. "You're happy today," she observed, tapping his nose. "I am," Daniel said. "And I have news." Emma's eyes widened. "Good news or medium news?" "Good," he promised. "I quit my old job," Emma gasped. "The mean boss one?" "The very same." She threw her arms around his neck. "Good. He didn't deserve you." Daniel felt something swell in his chest, something warm and strong. "And," he added, "I think I found a new job." "One that lets me see you more," Emma squealed. "Daddy, that's the best news." He lifted her up, kissed her forehead, and let himself really feel the relief washing through him. Parents around them hustled their kids into cars, kids chattered loudly, teachers waved goodbye. Ordinary background noise. But to Daniel, it all sounded like life letting him back in. Home, where healing starts that evening, the apartment felt different. Not bigger, not cleaner, not brighter, just home. Emma drew pictures at the table, doodling stars and hearts and a smiling cloud labeled Cloudy McCloud Face. Daniel cooked without rushing, without pressure, without fear. Later, after bedtime stories and sleepy giggles, Daniel tucked Emma in. Her little hand reached for his. "Daddy," she whispered. "You're happy now, right?" Daniel brushed her hair back softly. "I'm getting there." A pause. "And that's enough." Emma smiled, the sleepy smile that always undid him. "Good, 'cause I like you best when you're soft." Daniel laughed softly, kissed her forehead, and watched her drift into dreams.